Everybody, Pat Kilner here. We've got a lot to cover. There's just so much going on here as we get into the spring market. We're going to talk climbing prices both nationally as well as locally. We're going to drill down locally into what's going on in Bethesda. And we're also going to talk about the term escalation clause, because if you're buying right now, you are definitely escalating in order to win. So I want to, by the way, if you get the Wall Street Journal, definitely look at a tale of two housing markets. Prices fall in the West while the East booms. Just came out here in the last couple of days. Phenomenal research article on what's going on in the West Coast versus on the East Coast. Here on the East Coast, we're seeing an absolute boom in prices still, in spite of 7+% interest rates. On the West Coast, totally different story. San Jose, tons of markets in California, Arizona, not doing nearly as well. In fact, losing ground when it comes to equity for folks who bought over the last 6 months to a year. So really interesting article. I'm not going to get too far into it today, but if you're really nerdy about this and want to know more about what's going on in the housing market, love the Wall Street Journal stuff, and tremendous article today. All right, let's talk about these climbing prices here nationally and what's behind them, because a lot of folks will say to me, gosh, what's going on? It seems as though you would assume that if the Fed is causing rates to go up by virtue of their bond policies, why is it that people are still buying houses? And I want to really get into that because it's super important. I hear folks who are thinking about selling their house who think that we are still in November. In November, by the way, what was happening is rates were steadily climbing. September, October, November. And what that did to housing demand is it sidelined a lot of people who didn't want to go and purchase in the short term at a 5% interest rate, because relative to what they were looking at 90 days prior, 60 days prior, it was a higher rate. Well, what if things just sort of corrected and all of a sudden I'm down at a lower rate and I don't have to do a refinance? So it sidelined a lot of people. Now that rates have established themselves around 7%, and that's become more normal to folks, everybody's flooding back in the marketplace. So what we're seeing is that between 2022 and 2023, there was a lot of folks sidelined. That means that demand didn't go anywhere. Folks just sat on the sidelines, and now they're rolling into 2023, and there's more demand than ever in 2023 for housing here in the DMV and up and down the East Coast. I went researching to understand a little bit about buyer sentiment, because there's so much news out there. You have to kind of cut through what actually is happening inside the mind of people who are looking to purchase a home. Found a great study by NerdWallet that said 67% of folks who are currently looking to purchase a home expect an imminent housing crash. Kind of pessimistic. 61% told pollsters that current mortgage rates are totally unprecedented, meaning these are folks who did not buy in the 80s. These are millennials for the most part. We know that the majority of folks looking to purchase now are millennials, and they've come of age, and there's a lot of cash available to them from their parents and from their own earnings. And so they're looking at mortgage rates and going, this is unprecedented. However, we're still in the market. 57% feel worse, however, about their ability to buy a home in 2023 because of mortgage rates, naturally. Now, let's talk about their mindset, regardless of those pessimistic trends or that pessimism about the marketplace. 83% of those polled say buying a home is a priority to them. Nearly 28 million Americans plan to buy a home in 2023, right? Remember that 83%. They still say they want to be in. The problem is only 5.95 million homes sold in 2022. And right now, we have fewer homes coming on the market than we saw a year ago. And 70% of those polled plan to buy a home in 2022, but failed due to offers that were not accepted. So as we saw, 83% say it's still a big priority to them. Many of them had already pulled the trigger in 2022. That means they're still around for the most part. People who are making offers, they're typically around a few months later. And so what we're finding again is a lot of pent-up demand coming into 2023. Let's look at this on a micro level. What does this look like in a luxury market like Bethesda? A lot of folks will say, well, luxury is the first thing to get beat up in a down market or in a tougher market. In Bethesda, we're not seeing any of that. New listings are down by 41% between the comparison being, by the way, February of this year, just passed, to February 2022. So between the two Februaries, 41% fewer listings came on the market this February versus last. Now, so that's the supply side, sort of blunt measure of supply. Let's look at what that low supply is doing in the marketplace. It's causing homes to fly off the market even faster. So your days on market is down by 23% year over year, February to February. Your average sold price, you might anticipate this at this point, is up almost 11.5% year over year. That's staggering. Now, let's look at where we were going into the spring last year. At the peak of the spring market, sellers who put their house on the market in Bethesda, on average, were reaping another 2.39% higher than what they were asking. So that list to sales price ratio is how we measure that. Now, where do we see things trending year over year, but February to February is actually better this year for sellers than it was last year. And last year was unprecedented. And again, what's really driving that is all of that pent up demand that we talked about from these past 6 months that sat on the sidelines coming into the market, and lower supply than we've seen even last year. And last year we were sucking wind for supply as well. So expect that the peak of list to sales price ratio will most likely exceed 102, 103, 104% perhaps even, based on these numbers in Bethesda. That's our estimation. Now, let's talk about escalation, because in order to win, you have to escalate in this market. Really, really quick. When you're talking about escalation, the easy way to think about this is that you're at a silent auction. And at a silent auction, you have the price that you're not going to exceed, your cap, and the factor by which you're going to beat out the next closest offer. A couple of things to really understand, though, about a real estate silent auction is that, first, it's not always silent. A good agent should be advocating for you in ways to circumvent the pure silent auction by trying to get your offer seen and heard in the midst of 20 plus other offers. Okay. So that's the first thing. Communication, however, gets really, really tough when on the listing side, the sellers are having to deal with a lot of paperwork. Their agents just dealing with a ton of paperwork. We're seeing, as people get 5+ offers, that communication gets harder and harder to have. So good agents have to find different ways to communicate a great offer to the other side. The second thing to really understand here is that what we saw in 2022 is that a lot of sellers were waiving their cap. So they'd have an escalation factor, but they'd say, listen, we'll go 15 grand on this $1.3 million house over anyone else, and we're not going to cap it. Now, that seemed like total crazy talk last year, and it was one of the first times in 18 years that I've seen that tactic used. However, those who were able to use that tactic and get into a house this year are looking back 12 months, retrospectively, and seeing that they actually made a great buy because the market has only been increasing, right? There was a little dip here in the colder months, but it's come roaring back. What should all this say? Is that if you're buying in the DMV, supply and demand are going to cause a continual increase in your price overall. And this is not the bust. We should not expect the bust that we saw in 08 and 09, because the fundamentals of that bust are not present here. What we are seeing, yes, are higher interest rates, but we're seeing exceptionally well-cured people who want to buy here locally, who are not willing to work super, super remote. They want the job market that the DC market has. They want the educational opportunities that we have here. They want the quality of life and the network that is the DMV, and they're willing to pay for it. So get in the market and hold long term, because that's how real estate works best. Look, you're going to buy a home at these elevated rates relative to where they were. But if you're going to buy that home and own it for 10 plus years, you're going to be able to refinance, lock in your mortgage at a more comfortable spot, and hold that for a long time and gain a whole lot of wealth in the process. So if you're looking to buy and hold for just a couple years, you might want to just sit on the sidelines and let this all play out. But if you're looking to buy longer term, it's a great market for it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.